Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 55 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined by Frank Frangie to talk over the Jaguars' head coach search. Before we get to that interview, we're going to start, as we always do, with some Jaguars trivia. Since Doug Peterson was hired in 2022, the Jaguars have a 1-7 record against the four teams remaining in this year's NFL playoff field. Which team did the Jaguars defeat in the last 3 years against the four playoff teams? Was it the Bills, the Chiefs, the Eagles, or the Commanders? Again, the Jags under Peterson went 1-7 against these teams, and the only team that they defeated was the Buffalo Bills back in 2022. It had to have been. They faced the Commanders in the very first game of Peterson's tenure and lost that one. They faced the Chiefs 3 times, including the postseason, lost all 3, 0-2 against the Eagles, but they did go 1-1 against the Bills. So there's a little bit of Jaguars trivia for you. This interview with Frank is pre-recorded, but I'll stick around until afterwards in case there's any questions, comments, concerns. So yeah, I'll throw it to past tense, not past tense, just past Gus. Here we go. Hello. Today we are welcomed in by Frank Frangie of The Frangie Show from 4 to 6 p.m. each weekday. He hosted alongside Hayes Carline. Frank is also obviously the voice of the Jaguars, doing play-by-play for a long time up in the booth now. He's here to talk to me and us about the Jaguars' head coaching search. Frank, thanks so much for joining the show again. How you doing?
Good to be here. I've got 7 electric blankets on, just so you know. So I'm free. Good to be with you.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I need to go get one myself. Hopefully everyone's staying warm during this really, really cold front we've got coming through Jacksonville and just the general area. But good to hear that you're staying warm, Frank. We did come up with some cold news yesterday. On Monday, it was announced that Ben Johnson, the former Detroit Lions offensive coordinator, will be taking the head coaching job with the Chicago Bears. He was kind of the consensus favorite, not just in Jacksonville, but obviously in Chicago and in a few different places around the league. And so before we get to a few different candidates the Jaguars could look to now that Johnson is unavailable, I just wanted your immediate reaction kind of to Johnson going to the Bears and whether that was a shock to you or not.
Well, it was a surprise, Gus. I think it surprised all of us, not just where he landed. I don't know that the landing place at the end of the day would have been a surprise. I thought the Raiders were in play, the Bears were in play, and the Jags were in play, according to everything you heard. I was surprised at how quickly it happened. By league rule, nobody could bring Ben in for a one-on-one until after his season was over. So according to everything I read, Monday the 20th was the earliest that he could go one-on-one and actually meet the owner, meet the GM, see the facility, walk around it. They meet him, he meets them, to any of these places. And when the day got here, all of a sudden, Ben Johnson, you look up and he's the Bears coach. So he couldn't have gone to Chicago unless he went at 8 a.m., which I don't think he did, according to all the accounts. So it happened with Ben Johnson without him ever touring anybody, without him ever going one-on-one. So that says to me, number one, he had a pretty good idea what he wanted to do. And number two, the Bears were willing to hire him sight unseen. Now, listen, I say sight unseen. You know what he's done. You know, with the 3 years of being a coordinator, he's done a very good job. He's a very good coordinator. Mm-hmm. But so I was surprised at how quickly it happened. And I think when more comes out about all the exchanges between he and the teams, I think you'll probably learn a lot more. But obviously, Ben wanted to move quickly. The Bears wanted to move quickly, and he's their new head coach. So I'm not surprised where it ended. I don't know that I would have guessed that. I might have guessed Jacksonville, but it doesn't shock me. I am shocked at how quickly it happened.
Yeah, it was a very quick roller coaster of emotion for Jaguars fans because obviously Washington had the major upset victory over Detroit on Saturday night, which means that Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn would be just quicker, more readily available for further interviews and then to be hired. And so there was hope in Jacksonville that Ben Johnson would be the next head coach, especially with him more readily available. But yeah, I was a little bit surprised by the landing spot just because I got kind of caught up in all the reporting. And there was obviously a lot of smoke with Tom Brady and the Raiders wanting to meet with Ben Johnson. it seemed like it was all a pretty good negotiation tactic, honestly, by Johnson's camp. And I think that he probably ended up going to the place that signed him the biggest check. I certainly don't think it has anything to do with the quarterback play. I think that Vegas was probably out. They don't have a quarterback in place, but I don't think that anyone's takeaway should be that Ben Johnson chose Caleb Williams over Trevor Lawrence or anything like that. But we've already spent plenty of time talking about Ben Johnson, and he's officially not coming to Jacksonville. I guess it's not quite official because they're finalizing the contract, so he hasn't put pen to paper. But yeah, Ben Johnson is, as far as we know, a Chicago Bear. So, Frank, we wanted to talk about 3 other candidates that we believe could be the Jaguars' next head coach. They are doing their second round of interviews this week with Robert Saleh. Who else do they have? Patrick Graham and Liam Cohen. And so we are going to talk about Liam Cohen, Robert Saleh, and actually Joe Brady, because as Ian Rappaport reported yesterday, the Jags could end up bringing in more guys. And Joe Brady, since his Buffalo Bills are still in the postseason, he's not eligible for that second in-person interview. And so Joe Brady will be a name to watch out for. But first, Liam Cohen seems to be like the front runner, especially now that Ben Johnson is supposedly out of the sweepstakes to be the Jaguars' head coach. And so, Frank, do you expect Cohen to be the guy just out of this list? But more than that, just what is the biggest thing that stands out to you in a positive way about Cohen as a head coach candidate?
He comes in, Gus, first. He's on Wednesday. Graham is on Thursday, and Saleh is on Friday. They're all, Saleh's already done one in-person interview, but this is his official in-person. Patrick's will be Thursday, and Liam's will be Wednesday. And then the Jags could make a decision. They will have met all the requirements. If they want to hire one of those 3 by Saturday morning, they can do so. Then it's up to them. Back to Liam Cohen, I'm excited about him. I said all along 2-3 weeks ago, I think the day Doug Peterson was fired or maybe the day after, that I thought the next Jaguar coach would be an offensive guy, and I'd be shocked if it wasn't. I also said I'd be surprised if Ben Johnson or Liam Cohen weren't the coach. I know Todd Monken well. I've followed Joe Brady's career. There's other offensive guys in play, but I felt like 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago even, Gus, that I thought it was going to be Ben Johnson or Liam Cohen. That's from everything I gained, everything I'd heard, people with whom I spoke, and I still think that. I think Liam Cohen's going to be their next coach. I like him. There's things I like about him probably more than Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson was a coordinator for 3 years with one head coach and one quarterback. That's his experience as a coordinator. I don't know that he's got a lot of guidance from mentors. He was under Adam Gase for 3 years at Miami. That's really the only offensive guy he's been under. Liam Cohen has been a coordinator at Maine, Kentucky, with the Rams, and with the Bucs. He's been a coordinator 4 places. In the NFL, he's been a coordinator for Matt Stafford and for Baker Mayfield, 2 different players. For 4 years, he was under Sean McVay, who I think is the sharpest offensive mind in the business. So he's had a lot of experience in learning. A coordinator 4 places, under Sean McVay for 4 years, worked with 2 different first overall picks in Stafford and Mayfield, and then did a marvelous job this year in his only year in Tampa Bay. So I love the background. I love who he is. I love how organized and detailed he is. Now, will he be a head coach? We don't know. I said the same thing about Ben Johnson. We really don't know which of these guys will wind up being good head coaches. But I love the pedigree of Liam Cohen. I really do. And I can tell you this, people in Tampa fear this. They don't want to lose him, and they're frightened about it. So I'm excited about what I think the Jags might have in Liam Cohen. I truly am.
Now, I did want to ask you about that because to me, it feels like that's just a rumor that's come straight out of the fan base, and I haven't seen any true reporting on that. So I wanted your take on if it's actually something to watch, is if Tampa Bay is truly considering firing Todd Bowles in order to keep Liam Cohen in the building, or if you think that that's mostly just a fan take.
I don't think they're going to do that, to your question, Gus. I think it's probably been discussed. I know 2 members of the media who have discussed it, not just fans, but I don't think it's going to land there. I don't think you're going to fire Todd Bowles, who's won a division 4 straight years. You don't fire a head coach who's won 4 straight division titles. So I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah, I think it's been discussed, but the point of that story is how valuable they think this guy is. Look, he's new to the party. He was there 1 year. He was in LA 2 different shifts, 1 year as a coordinator. But he's been in college. I think people are figuring out, wow, we may have something here. And when we finally get it, someone's about to take him away from us. So I think that's why you have all the conversation about it, Gus. But at the end of the day, no, I don't think they're going to fire a coach who's won that division years in a row to promote a guy that's never been a head coach.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I agree with that. I also agree with your point about Liam's experience, and especially I feel like your co-host Hayes Carline has been not necessarily anti-Cohen, but probably more so playing devil's advocate. I feel like Hayes' main stance against Cohen is his lack of experience. But I think you broke it down well, especially as it relates to Ben Johnson, because then, the Lions do rank first in total yards and points scored in the last 3 years, but his experience isn't really as extensive as Cohen's. It's really a good sign that Cohen has worked with multiple quarterbacks. Obviously, the work that Ben Johnson has done with Jared Goff up in Detroit is amazing, but that Liam Cohen helped Baker Mayfield produce the best NFL season of his career, and he turned Will Levis into a top 33 draft pick. So he's had work with both of those guys. You mentioned Matt Stafford, he worked with in LA. So he has a little bit more just diversity in his experience in that regard. And so that really stands out to me. And then in terms of the scheme, just to get nitty gritty for a second, I really like how Liam Cohen sends 5 eligible receivers out on routes a lot. I think that Jacksonville, especially this year, in an effort to try to help Trevor Lawrence, try to simplify the offense for him a little bit, just try to help the offense in general more so. They were only sending out 2 or maybe 3 receivers on a lot of routes, especially deep play action shots. But I think that if you have all 5 of your eligible receivers actually going out and running a route, as opposed to half of them staying in and pass blocking, then it actually gives a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence a lot more options to go with the football. And I think that was a big reason for Baker's success in Tampa Bay this past year. And so if Cohen is a hire, I would be really excited specifically about what he's able to do with getting everyone out running a route. So that would just be one thing to look forward to. But in terms of turning the faucet back cold, Frank, before we get to the next guy we want to talk to, do you have any kind of lingering questions about Liam Cohen as a head coach candidate?
Well, yeah, a lot to unpack there. And back to your point about Ben Johnson and Hayes' disappointment, others' disappointment. Listen, I'm the play-by-play voice of the team. If Ben Johnson was going to be the head coach here, I'd be going on and extolling his virtues too, Gus. I don't want to be disingenuous. I don't want to say, well, I never wanted him. I thought he would have been fantastic. So I don't want to misrepresent this. But he's not going to be here. He's going to be with the Bears. So let's look at the next guys. The biggest concern I would have had about him is the same one I have about Liam Cohen. He's never done it. I said this on the air yesterday, and I'll continue to say it. When you hire a coach who's never been a head coach, it's a crapshoot. Now, sometimes it becomes Sean McVay and Kevin O'Connell and Kevin Stefanski, and it works out wonderfully. Other times the guys aren't ready, and they don't last very long. So I'm not smart enough from afar to tell which ones will be good and which ones aren't. The only concern I have about Liam is that he hasn't done it as a head coach. He hasn't been in front of the entire room, and that's a whole different dynamic. My gut is he's going to be good. Gus, it really is. My gut is he's going to be good at that. But that's my only concern. As for the different kind of offenses, what I like best is, sometimes how many guys you send in the pattern and how many you don't is a product of a lot of things. Number one, how good is your offensive line? Do you have to keep people in? How good are your backs in pass protection? All of those things come into play. And part of the coordinator's job, and in this case, the head coach's job, if he gets the job, will be to build that aspect of it. So I think they all have 5 wide, and they all have flood the defense with a bunch of routes in their game, in their playbook. They also have max protection and 2 receiver routes in their playbook. And how much you call one versus the other or some hybrid of that based on protection and how good is your quarterback at reading it and how good is your quarterback at getting it out. The one thing Cohen had with both Stafford and Mayfield was guys who were very experienced. They had made the mistakes, the early mistakes that Trevor made early in his career and other quarterbacks make young in their career. They had already gotten that out of the system by the time Liam got in there. Same thing with Ben Johnson. By the time he got Jared Goff, all those young quarterback mistakes, he made them in LA before he ever got to Detroit. So both Ben Johnson with Goff and Liam with Stafford and Mayfield, they got a 28, 29-year-old quarterback who had made all those mistakes. Trevor's still going through that process, so that'll be the adjustment for whoever comes here, including Liam Cohen. Absolutely.
And I agree with your point where the question mark is just the fact that he hasn't done it before as a head coach, hasn't been a head coach at any level, actually. But there's obviously a lot of risk and reward built into that, where you want to be able to be the team that finds the next McVay, the next Kevin O'Connell, the next Kyle Shanahan. But you need to – there's some risk involved with that, with going out and finding that caliber of coach. So let's move on to Robert Saleh, who obviously everyone in Jacksonville should be familiar with him because he was not just a head coach over the past few years with the New York Jets, but he also coached the linebacker position in Jacksonville under Gus Bradley from 2014 to 2016. And so apparently Saleh and the Cohen family are very close. And I think that even if Saleh is not the hire as head coach, it seems like a good fit would be Liam Cohen as head coach and Robert Saleh as defensive coordinator. But whether defensive coordinator or head coach, Frank, what excites you the most about Saleh as a coaching candidate?
Well, he's an all-world good guy. Yes, he is respected. He's got 7 kids. He's a good man. Every player in that locker room respects him, respects what he stands for, the culture. He's a good dude, and he's a good football coach. So you could do a lot worse than Robert Saleh as your football coach. I promise you that. Nobody will be respected more, work harder, mandate that his players work hard. He's good. He's good. And I think he's going to get another chance, and I hope he does at some point, whether it's here or somewhere. The concern is he had 3 losing seasons in New York, and he was fired with a 2-3 record, so essentially a 4th losing season. A lot of that was out of his control. He got stuck with Zach Wilson, who wasn't very good. The whole Aaron Rodgers thing, last year, the year before this, he got hurt after 1 play. This year, it never seemed functional, even though he had it back. So a lot of that stuff was out of Robert's control. But it's hard to bring into a fan base a coach with 3 losing seasons when you just fired a guy who had 1 losing season in 3 years. I mean, you just fired a guy with 2 winning seasons and 1 losing season. Can you go bring in a guy with 3 straight losing seasons who's never had a winning season? Again, a lot of that's out of Robert's control. And I like Robert. And again, he's one of the most respected people. And if he winds up being the Jaguars coach, I'll get on board no matter who the coach is and extol the virtues of him. But that's my biggest concern. And the other part is, what would he do with offense? Somebody's got to really develop. These are the critical years for Trevor. Years 5 through 8 are when a quarterback really steps forward. We just talked about it with Stafford and Goff and Mayfield. Well, these are the critical years for Trevor. So if you don't bring in Liam Cohen, you bring in a defensive guy. What does he do offensively? That'd be my biggest question.
Yeah, I'm with you hand in hand on this one. To me, the biggest strength is just that the guys play for him, and that's evident on film. And I think it's a lot harder to tell who are good kind of culture guys opposed to good play callers, because good play callers, you can go look at the stats or go look at the film and kind of see for yourself. But sometimes it can be easier said than done to figure out who's really like the leader of men and who's really doing a good job of setting a culture in a building behind the scenes. But it was pretty evident that Robert Saleh was great at that in New York. And even if it didn't translate to a lot of winning football, you could tell, especially after he was fired after week 5 of this season, there was just a massive drop-off in really team performance, but especially defensive performance. And it wasn't just defensive performance, but it was a lot of stuff like missed tackle rate and tackles for loss and a lot of stats that relate to effort, really. And so you could see there was just a massive drop-off when Saleh was let go. And so I definitely wouldn't have any questions with him about culture or defense, but the question would be, can he manage an offense? Because I hear you in that, like, it was kind of out of his control in New York, and the quarterback situation was awful. But I still feel like maybe he could have done a little bit more, try to do something else, whether it was hire a different coordinator, at least have a bigger hand in the way that the offense was being orchestrated. And I don't know, I certainly wasn't there in New York, and so maybe he tried that, and it just didn't really work out. But I think that a question for a lot of coordinators, guys on one side of the ball or the other, like a question that we would have for Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen this coaching cycle is, like, we feel pretty confident about those 2 guys on the offensive side of the ball, or are they actually able to lead the entire team with defense and special teams too? And so I think with Robert Saleh, the question is still, or the jury is still kind of out on him a little bit, for whether he can also lead an offense and special teams and entire organization. But in terms of leading a locker room, leading a defense, yeah, not a lot of questions for Robert Saleh. The last guy we wanted to talk about today was Joe Brady, the Buffalo Bills offense coordinator. Again, if you didn't hear the beginning of this, he is not eligible to do an in-person interview with the Jaguars because his team is still in the postseason. But we're kind of sort of speculating that if he were available, the Jaguars would bring him in for their second round of interviews. And so, Frank, what stands out to you about Joe Brady?
Well, he's a terrific offensive mind, and quarterbacks really connect with him. Watching what he did with Joe Brady at LSU in 2019, still one of the best coaching jobs I've ever seen at the college level. It reminded me of the thing Spurrier used to do at Florida, Gus, with and those guys, and Rex Grossman, and that's what it reminded me of. So nobody connects with the quarterback. Nobody sees the game through his quarterback's eyes better than Joe Brady. I think that's his strength. Now, look, he's got Josh Allen. You know, that's a pretty good quarterback to see things through his eyes, but he does see that. You know, it didn't go well in Carolina. I'd want to ask the question why it didn't go. But I'd be surprised, and I'm guessing here, Gus, this isn't based on inside information. I'd be surprised if it gets to that. I would not be surprised if the Jags have a coach this coming weekend, and Joe Brady's coaching a game on Sunday. And I could be way off on this. And if I am, it won't be the first time. But my guess is there's a reason 3 coaches are being brought back this week. There's a reason that 3 guys that got their attention, Liam Cohen, Patrick Graham, and Robert Saleh are all coming in this week. And I'm going to guess, and it's a guess, that after those 3 interviews, you might have a coach over the weekend or the first part of the week. So that I'm guessing at that. That's what I would think. So Joe Brady's a good football coach. I would question whether he's ready. Now, you can make the same, just like I did Cohen and just like you do with Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson seems of the 3, the one that's been groomed to be the head coach the most quickly.
Yeah.
But they're all about the same age. You know, they're all I know that Ben Johnson is 38, Cohen's 39, Brady might be 35. He may be younger. But they're all in there together. And the question you ask about all of those guys that have never done it before is how they would do as a head coach. Joe Brady's going to be a head coach in the NFL. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Is he ready to do it now would be the question.
Totally agree. And I think that really for all 3 of these guys, one of the things that stands out is just how much easier they make the jobs of their quarterbacks, even when it's like a Baker Mayfield and a Jared Goff versus a superhuman in Josh Allen. All 3 of these coordinators have done a great job of, as you've said too, improving the offensive line, improving the run game. That that's a huge component of it, but really in more ways than one, just trying to make the jobs of their quarterbacks easier. And so that'll be something to look forward to in Jacksonville if they get any of those guys. I did want to just shout out or mention Patrick Graham before we get out of here, because even if we weren't going to spend a ton of time on him, he is being brought in for a second interview. And so I didn't know if you had any quick thoughts on him. I actually grew to love him when I was doing the more research I did, the more I was impressed by him.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. It's not Shad's style to bring in a guy just to go through the motion. If he's bringing a guy back in here, that means that guy got his attention. So I don't think Shad's not a go through the motions guy. And so for me, if Patrick Graham's coming in here, he did something to get their attention. He's a modern day Mike Vrabel. He's a modern day Tomlin. I don't know if he's as good as those guys, obviously, but he's tough. His players will play with a toughness. They will play. He's been around the league, so he understands defensive concepts. He's been with a number of teams. He's a good football coach. Now, again, whether or not he's ready to lead the Jacksonville Jaguars, my biggest question, I wouldn't question any of that with him. He's a respected, hard-nosed guy whose teams will be tough. The question I have is, same what I have with Robert, but even more so because he hasn't been a head coach. At least Robert has had to go through picking the offensive coordinator, figuring out who's the best guy to lead the offense. Patrick's never had to do that. So not only has he never been a head coach, but he's never had to position an offensive coordinator. Does he go bring in a guy and then leave it alone and make that guy the head coach of the offense? What does he go about? How does he go about that? So I respect Patrick Graham a lot. Lots of experience with lots of franchises playing good defensive football. My question would be, what do you do on offense? Because offense is Trevor's development is critical, but you've got a lot of your offense built. You've got your two offensive tackles. You have a mega star at wide receiver. It looks like you've got 2 decent running backs who I like the 2 running backs. A lot of that's built. If Evan Ingram comes back, and shame on them if they don't bring him back, along with Brenton Strange, that's a good combination. So a lot of that's built, but you have to know what you're going to do with that offense, Gus. And that would be my question with Patrick Graham.
Totally. For Graham or Saleh, if either of them become the head coach, then immediately the biggest question in Jacksonville is who's going to be the offensive coordinator and play caller, especially since you do have Trevor Lawrence, especially, and also Brian Thomas Jr. Like those two being on the team for hypothetically 10 plus years is something to gawk at. But yeah, Graham spent at like a good half decade in New England coaching linebackers in the front of the defense for Belichick, won a Super Bowl there. Then he coached, he was a defensive coordinator in Miami under Brian Flores. He was a defensive coordinator in New York under, I believe, Wink Martindale, or I don't think they overlapped. But he does have an extensive background, and he's not just a Belichick disciple anymore. He's gotten a lot more experience throughout the league. I don't know where the nickname came from, but he's nicknamed the Black Picasso because of how great his week-to-week game plans are. And so I would really be excited about Patrick Graham as a defensive coordinator, or even as head coach, even if he hasn't gotten a lot of talk here in Jacksonville. But that'll do it for this episode. As Frangie said, I think you can expect one of these guys to be the hire, hopefully by the end of this week, but we shall see. Appreciate everyone tuning in or continuing to tune in. We'll be back on Thursday with Mia at 9:04 a.m. Thanks again, Frank, for joining. Appreciate you. Stay warm out there.
All right, buddy. You too. Take care.
All right. Appreciate it, everyone. Have a good one. Psych. I'm back again. Just to go over a couple comments that we had before we get out of here. Robert said on YouTube earlier, I heard Trevor's camp wanted Cohen. I'm interested in what your source is, Robert. I don't know if you just saw the same tweet that I did from Dilla, but E_Dilla, if you know him on Jags Twitter, mentioned that Trevor's camp might have been extremely pro Cohen. And so if that's the case, then I guess that's good news. And just to further explain my earlier point about Cohen and getting 5 eligible receivers out, it's basically like providing more answers to the test. There's far too many times, especially this past year, where the Jaguars or Trevor Lawrence would have really just 1 or 2 options. And if they weren't open, he would have to kind of like eat a sack or throw the ball away. But by having more options out there, even if you hypothetically have less blockers in and less time to get the ball off, just by having more answers to the test, more options available to you to go for places to go with the football is, I think, a good thing, especially for a really good processor like Trevor. And so I wouldn't be surprised if what Robert is saying is true, that Trevor's camp did really want Liam Cohen. But someone else said, seems like no one, Michael George said on YouTube, seems like no one else wants Michael Cohen besides the Jaguars. He said it reminds him of how the Jags landed Nick Foles, and it seemed like no one else was really in the market for Nick Foles, and the Jags just kind of overpaid themselves for Foles. I think that was definitely the case back then. And with Cohen, yeah, I think as far as I know, the only head coach interview he does have is with the Jaguars. And so I don't think that should be like a panic sign for Jaguars fans at all, the fact that only one team is interviewing him, because I think that most teams around the league probably would agree with Hayes, honestly, that Liam, even if he does have experience in a couple of different spots, he's only been an offense coordinator in the NFL for 2 total seasons now. So he might just need a little bit more experience before he gets his shot. But I don't know. Again, I wouldn't say that that's like a reason to panic for Jaguars fans. Maybe they see something that no other teams do, and they certainly don't deserve the benefit of the doubt in that regard. But I don't know. It is worth mentioning for sure, though. I feel like there was one other thing. Reedy said, I know I'm late, but this team is really trying hard to make me angry. I think that's fair. Even if I think that like Cohen and Robert Saleh, or Cohen and Patrick Graham as defensive coordinator, or even if Cohen somehow becomes unavailable and like they end up with Joe Brady and Patrick Graham, I still think that's a good coaching staff. But at the end of the day, like not getting Ben Johnson is just a major whiff. And it's less has to do with the name and more so just the process, because various national reporters said, not just when Balky was retained earlier this month, but also yesterday once Johnson got the Bears job, that the fact that Balky was retained by the Jaguars was not good for the coaching search. There was multiple candidates, obviously including Ben Johnson, who were less interested in the Jaguars job because Trent Balky was there. And so I think that Ben Johnson probably ended up taking the Chicago job because they offered him the most money, and that's the biggest factor. But still, obviously, Trent Baalke was a factor. And even beyond Ben Johnson, the fact that he was hired on Monday, and now Aaron Glenn has an interview with the Jets today, and they probably won't let him out the building. We'll try to sign him to a deal. So that's both Lions coordinators hired by Tuesday, and neither of them took a second interview with the Jaguars. And I feel like it's pretty inexplicable for the Jaguars to at least line up interviews earlier in the week to be able to kind of like get to the front of line and be able to get their guy. But now, like, it seemed like they waited around a little bit, maybe for Ben Johnson. I think it's maybe fortunate for the Jaguars that they're the only team really seriously considering Liam Cohen as a head coach candidate, because maybe he would have gotten snatched up too, just because of the way that the Jaguars are doing their process. They're just taking their time, and there's not any reason not to, or there's not any reason to take your time. You don't want to rush through this process, obviously, but you want to be able to identify your top candidates and go out and get them. And so, yeah, tough process. Reedy, I feel you. I think it's fair to be angered by the team, even if they do end up with a really good head coach and pair of coordinators by the end of the week. So, yeah, I think that'll do it for us. One last thing. I saw my guy Tevin this weekend. A few months ago, I think I said that I ran into a fan at Publix, and I just shouted him out for coming up and saying hi. I ran into the same guy on Saturday. His name is Tevin. So shout out to Tevin. Hopefully you're hearing this, but appreciate you coming up and saying hello. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking with it and continuing to tune in. Again, we'll be back on Thursday with Mia O'Brien. I'm sure we'll be talking more about Liam Cohen, but again, 9:04 Thursday, Mia O'Brien. See you there. Thanks, everyone. Take care.